Hey everybody, welcome. We're just sitting here smiling because we have to have a thumbnail for this talk. And so you got to pause a little bit. If you ever do a talk with me, you'll kind of get to know. You're in the studio. What do
Hey,
you think?
it's exciting stuff.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here with Sarah Whiteman. Sarah, why don't you just tell a little bit about your family, where you're from, all that.
So we live in South Tampa, and I'm married to my husband, Brian Whiteman. We've been married almost 24 years. We have 3 adult children, Libby, Vincent, and Gus. And we have a wonderful son-in-law, Jan Michael, and a beautiful and amazing granddaughter, Cammie.
Yeah, first one.
First one.
Unbelievable. And 2 dogs, right?
2 dogs, yeah.
And I understand they're strays.
They were.
They were strays. Now they have a home.
They've been adopted.
Yes, and I love that. I love your heart.
Yeah.
Brian adopted one and you adopted one.
Yes.
You each have your own dog.
Yes.
Well, the reason why we're here today is that my heart has been for you guys, the church, to have opportunities to share how God has redeemed things in your life, and sometimes how he has taken those moments where you were like, there's no way, this is dead, it's over, it's gone, like the ship has sailed, but God, right? And if he hadn't done something. And so I've gotten to know you a little bit in your story, and it's an amazing story. There's a lot to share. We're only going to probably be 20 to 30 minutes here, so we can't share it all. So we're going to try to get to whatever the Holy Spirit wants to share.
Yes.
But let's start with, let's go back. Tell us a little bit about your early upbringing in the church and all of that, so people kind of just know your background a little bit.
Yeah, so my parents did a wonderful job instilling in us that we go to church on Sundays, that God is important, and that it just was kind of who we were as a family.
Yeah.
However, I didn't really come to know Jesus until my mid-20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you knew church, you knew the rituals, you participated,
Right.
but you didn't really know, you didn't have a relationship.
No.
Okay. So as you kind of grew up and then you start getting to be a little bit older, every teenager goes through this part of their life where they're like, I don't need anybody. I don't need my parents anymore. I got it figured out. And you kind of went through that as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
As a matter of fact, as a teenager, we were at that point given a choice if we wanted to go to church or if we just...
Or not. Okay, and?
Well, hello. Yeah, sleep is way
kidding me?
better.
Yeah, heck yeah. On
At least
Sunday?
that's what I thought. So I kind of slowly started in my teenage years drifting away, and then as I became a young adult, I I pretty much just stopped going altogether.
Did you have a chip on your shoulder or anything like that, or did you have or did you were just like,
No,
whatever?
I honestly just kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Okay.
It really was something that, I mean, I knew it was important, but everything else was important to me at that time.
Yeah. So chasing that, looking at the world and not looking at God.
Right.
Looking at the world.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Didn't really know the difference at that point, honestly.
Yeah. And you met a guy.
Yeah. We were in high school together.
Okay.
He was the bad boy. I was the good girl.
Yeah.
And I have a tendency to want to fix people. So that was my project, and I ended up marrying that project.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how old were you?
18.
Got married at 18.
18.
I mean, gosh, that is early.
So early.
And looking back, you're like, it wasn't the right thing.
No.
But
no.
Why did you do it?
I honestly did it because I wanted to prove people that didn't believe that we would make it. I wanted to prove to them that we could.
Wow.
So,
have you ever done that? Right? Like, I think I've done that where you do something because you're like, I'm going to prove somebody else is wrong. What would you say to somebody that's thinking that right now? Like maybe they're doing something to prove somebody wrong.
Time out. Don't do it. Don't do it. I was the one that got proven wrong. And it was not a good situation. And found myself in some pretty deep waters.
Yeah, so let's get into the deep waters. And by the way, her transparency in this is like a big deal. So just, open your heart to receiving what she's going to share.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage. So you get married. Your husband is going into the military.
Yes.
He gets shipped off to Japan.
Yes.
So you had this kind of long distance relationship, and you weren't living at that point for God.
No.
You weren't living for Jesus.
No.
It was like, I'm doing my thing, right?
Yeah, my thing.
And you made some choices. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so at that time in my life, of course, I wasn't living close to the Lord, not even living anywhere remotely near that part of my life. And
Would you say it was a selfish time?
selfish, confusing,
Searching.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of finding my way, but obviously didn't find the right way for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had just gotten married, um, and he shipped off to Japan. I was going to finish out a little bit of time back at home, and then join him.
Hmm.
And during that brief moment of time, the weekend before I was to move over to Japan as a 19-year-old girl,
Wow.
I had an affair.
Wow.
And that affair resulted in the gift of my daughter.
Mm. So you got pregnant, not knowing, obviously, right then.
No, I didn't know until I got to Japan.
So then you went to
Yeah.
Japan
Yeah.
and found out you were pregnant.
Yes.
And at that point, what's going through your mind? Because you don't know who's the father, I guess, right?
No, at that point, I really didn't know.
Okay. But you had this sort of secret.
Yeah. I
you
mean,
were
I
keeping.
knew, and a couple of my friends back home knew, but nobody else knew. And, I go to Japan, I get settled in, I'm not feeling well. I go to the doctor, find out you're pregnant.
Wow.
And so obviously, like, fear sets in,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And my husband at the time was pretty abusive,
Mm.
not physically, but definitely controlling and
Mm.
mentally, and, just not the situation I really wanted to find myself in.
Right. Which
Uh,
makes it even harder.
yeah. So finding out I was pregnant, while, most people would be very excited and joyful, and I was all those things, but at the same time, deep down in my heart, I knew that this meant I had to face the reality of my choices.
Right. So what'd you do?
In the beginning, I did nothing except for hurt myself in my thought process.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about that.
Um, just knowing what this would look like, or the uncertainty of what it was going to look like,
Yeah.
was very fearful. There was a lot of shame, um, tons of guilt, regret,
Yeah.
and, not knowing God then. I didn't understand the blessing. I knew of God. I understood that He gave life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was still very hard to go through those months of being pregnant and also carrying that dark secret.
Right. So you decided to kind of like, well, just
Yeah,
just go with it.
I kept it myself.
Right.
I
Let's
didn't,
just go with
yeah.
it. No one has to know. At what point then did you find out that really it wasn't your husband's child?
So my daughter and I actually left by this. So the pregnancy happened.
Uh-huh.
When I found out I was pregnant, I moved back to Indiana.
Okay.
I did not want to live in Japan pregnant. I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved back home, stayed with my sister, and then he got orders to California.
Okay.
So after Libby was born, she was just months old.
Mhm.
We drove out to California, and we
Mhm.
lived there periodically during her first year of life.
Okay.
During that time, the abuse was there, but it ended up becoming physical.
Mm.
And so when that happened, I was, I guess, prompted to get my daughter out of there.
Yeah.
I didn't want her
Yeah.
growing up in that environment.
Right.
The emotional abuse I could handle
Right. But physical.
without her seeing it.
Yeah.
But the
I mean, even
physical,
that emotional abuse is terrible as well.
it's horrible,
Yeah.
but I'm just
But
saying,
I know
like,
what you
I was
mean.
able to contain it and kind of hide it myself.
Sure.
But
So then did you?
so we moved back to Indiana. I took
Okay.
Libby and I moved her
Yep.
back to Indiana.
And you end up getting a divorce?
We got a divorce, which was very
I'm sure.
destructive and
Right.
horrible.
Right.
And my first thought was, well, let's just get him out of the picture,
Yeah.
because he's
Right.
not even her dad, or possibly couldn't be her dad.
Okay.
So that's when I revealed to him, hey,
Mm. Yeah.
we're not married. This may not even be your child.
Right.
And so we did a paternity test, and
Wow.
was not his.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So at this point now you still have your daughter and you're like, how am I going to handle that?
Yeah.
What did you choose to do there?
Oh, it was hard. Just those thoughts of, what are you going to say? What are you going to tell
Do
her?
you even
How
need
do you tell
to?
her?
Right, probably.
As a kid, she was 2 years old. Like
Right.
I wanted her to know, but
Yeah.
it was so hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I was basically manipulated into not telling her the truth,
Or
something would happen to me.
right, by
So
your ex-husband.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So there's a lot of coercion. There's a lot of
yeah,
just abuse there mentally and
yeah,
even physically. So you're still like obviously in that time of your life you were stiff arming God. And you like trying to do it on your own. At what point did you have like a moment? Was there like a God moment?
Oh yeah,
Tell
yeah.
us about that. Like what happened?
So yeah, I had rehearsed over and over and over in my head. I listened to so many lies. I had felt the ramifications of my sin. I lived it. That was my life.
Yeah.
And so one day I was just sitting on my bed and I just asked God, like, if there's any way you can take this torture away from me.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was. It was just mental torture. And
Was it the unforgiveness part mostly?
yeah,
For yourself?
I just felt so bad
Yeah.
for my sin that caused this pain that I knew my daughter would have to face one day.
Yeah.
And it wasn't by her choice.
Right.
Our sin sometimes, a lot of times, affects other people just
Yeah.
as much as it does us.
Yeah.
And so I just sat there and I said, God, if you'll take it away, I just need you to forgive me. And he did. I felt it immediately. And I just heard him gently say, you've got to just forgive yourself too.
Yeah.
You have to let it go.
Yeah.
And I'll take care of the details. And
Right.
he's done that for sure over 1,000
But this was like a moment
times.
where you cried out to God. It was
Yeah.
in your desperation.
Yes.
And he was faithful to show up.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
But then you had to accept that.
Yes.
Did you have to do anything to get it?
No.
Nope.
It was just an act of surrender to say, look, I
Okay.
just need you.
So that happens and now you like experience God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about in this church, we have this sort of phraseology we use from a mentor of mine that if we hear something, we'll probably forget it. If we see it, we'll remember it. But if we experience something, we'll understand it. You experienced God's presence with you and it changed you.
Yes. From that day forward, actually.
So that was kind of your moment of like, okay, it's almost like a reset button.
Yeah.
But you still got to live this out.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah. I knew there would be steps that I would still need to take.
Yeah.
And I knew that it would be a lifetime of just working it all out. But I knew that I could do it because of the peace that God had given me.
So you knew you were forgiven.
Yes.
So then you were like, okay, well, we're going to wait on the Lord now and but you're willing now to like whatever God needs me to walk through.
Yeah.
And then she gets to 14 years old. You got remarried.
Yes.
To Brian.
Yep.
Who you've been married to for 24 years?
24
years.
This year, yeah.
He takes her on.
Oh, yeah.
As
immediately.
His own daughter.
Yeah.
This other guy doesn't know anything about it. And so you come to a point where there's sort of like a moment where you're like, you feel like God's prompting you, or how did that come about to actually reach out to him?
Well, that's probably
another story.
Talk.
Yeah, but it happens.
But it does happen.
Somehow
and
God...
eventually it had to happen. And God even used it through the way it happened. And he still was faithful in that. So it was
interesting.
Yeah.
So it comes to the point where you have to confront that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
You have to confront the fact that your daughter needs to know that her dad is this other man. And
I wanted to tell her all along, but I just didn't feel safe enough. And finally at that time, it was a safe time for us.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. And so at that time, were you ready for it? Like, was God in that? How did you feel at the time?
No, I felt very blindsided by what happened.
Okay.
But again, God was faithful,
right?
and
He takes the things
he
that
takes the junk and he makes it a
I
treasure.
know
It's
he
so
does, right?
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so
You
crazy.
don't
Yeah.
think so in in the moment though. It's
No.
like terrible. You're all in your feelings. You
Yeah.
can't see. We go to the what ifs,
Yeah.
but what if this? What if that? Right?
Yeah.
And we can't really see it. So ultimately, your fears are she's going to rebel. She's going to reject you. What if I
Yeah.
tell this guy? What's he going to? That's going to be terrible. He's going to be angry, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what happens. God uses
No.
it for good. How?
Yeah. Well, for one, they're going to the Bahamas next week on vacation together.
That's unbelievable.
So that, they've had, it's hard, she didn't meet him till she was 14. But he has a desire to know her. She has a desire to have that relationship. She has a brother that she didn't know about.
Right.
Um,
And he was
God's,
open to it. He was
yeah,
actually like excited
yeah.
to
He,
know.
he flew out that next week and
It's
met us in
unbelievable.
Florida. Yeah.
So all of your fears were kind of for nothing in that part of it where,
Yeah. I mean, all of the things that I thought could happen really didn't ever
and what
happen.
about her?
She's a
She's not
strong
mad at you.
woman.
She's
I don't think so.
you guys have such a
No.
good
No,
relationship.
and I think that, it's our natural tendency to think that we're gonna ruin our kids' lives, right?
Right.
Our decisions are gonna ruin their lives, but God still even works in their lives,
Yeah, he does.
and he's worked a miracle in her heart, and I think that as hard as it is, and it's challenging for her, and I still even feel guilty on the times where she feels like, holidays and visits. I mean, she's constantly having to
Yeah,
make
a little more
choices,
complicated, but
but it's she still embraces it, and it makes me feel so proud of her at the same time.
yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, what's really been neat, so having gotten to meet you, I think you've been a part of the church for about 4 years.
Yeah.
And we went and had coffee one day, and you just kind of like really appreciated your transparency because you said, I'm going to share my story with you.
Yeah.
Wasn't ready for this yet, but now like God is showing you like it's okay.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the amazing thing for me, how encouraged I was for to see the freedom that God had given you
Oh,
in that
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And then hearing the story and then getting to meet your daughter,
Yeah.
Libby, was like, she came to my house for a whole
Yeah, she
experience.
did.
I got to give her a big hug and I just saw the miracle. She is literally the miraculous redemptive power of the Lord living and breathing. And then God gives you a granddaughter
Yeah.
as well, little Cammy, and I
Yeah.
got to hold her,
Yep.
which was beautiful. And here's a picture because you recently had some pictures taken.
Yes.
Tell us what this picture is.
So this picture represents 5 generations, of women on my side of the family, and it starts, with Grandma Blackwell down to my mom, and then me, and just watching the beautiful picture of everything just kind of trickle down
Yeah.
from starting here to my mom, then to me, and now watching it flow through Libby and now Cammy. It's
Yeah.
just a beautiful picture, and knowing it's going to continue on,
Yep.
like for generations and
Blessings to
generations.
1,000
too.
generations,
Yeah.
right? See, your faithfulness and your receiving the righteousness of Christ does get passed on. It does get poured out
Yeah.
onto the amazing, amazing story of redemption.
Yes.
We could talk all day. There's probably been other things in your life, but there was one other big thing that happened because I think people think like, oh, I overcame this, and then it's like, all right, now life is just going to be this cruise control. It's hills and valleys
Right.
while we're in this world. But what you're discovering is that even the things that come against us are not for our destruction. God will use them for good. And so 10 years ago,
Yeah.
you're at home, you're putting the
Mhm.
kids down, Brian's out going to the gas station or whatever,
Mhm.
and you are getting worried he hasn't come back
Right.
in a normal time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you knew he was just down the street. So what happens?
So I just put the kids down for bed. It was a weeknight, Thursday night, I remember, and Libby wasn't home, but the boys were home. I tucked them in, and he had gone just down the street, and he left his phone, so I knew he wasn't going far. And he was just gone for a while, and I thought that's just not like him, not to just come right back. And so I stepped out the front door and walked down the sidewalk, and from a distance, I could see the ambulances. I knew there was an accident that had happened. I thought maybe he was just down there, like, helping
Right.
or,
That's what you're hoping. Yeah.
just yeah, it didn't really even cross my mind that it was him. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But, I walked down closer and I could see his car, and, I ran down there and, I could see the severity of the accident. I could see where they like, removed the top of his car to get him out, and he wasn't there, and I just
Couldn't
kept
find him.
no, I'm like, where's the driver of this car? Where's he at?" I didn't know where he went, and, at that point, someone walked me over to the ambulance, and I gave they asked me, to identify the person who I thought was inside, and I did, and they said, "Yes, you need to follow us immediately, we're gonna take him." They had already intubated him on the scene, and, he had suffered a severe traumatic brain injury.
And what did you think at the time? Like,
I didn't even know what a traumatic brain injury was.
okay. Did you
So,
think he was gonna live at that point? What were you thinking?
I really didn't know.
Had
I
no
mean,
clue.
I got the idea that it was bad
Mhm.
from the ambulance personnel, um, but when we got to the hospital, um, like, I was escorted into this room, and, um, I knew what that meant because my brother-in-law, um, shot himself, and I was there when they took my sister into that room. It's not just the emergency room, it's like a
Right.
private section, and so I knew it was really bad, I just didn't know, like, how bad. I didn't know if they were gonna come in and tell me he had passed, I didn't know what they were gonna do, but we just waited and waited, and they came in and just said, "Your husband suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, do you understand what that means?" And I'm like, "No, I
Yeah,
don't
how are you
know
supposed
what
to know
that
that?
means."
Right.
You don't know what a traumatic brain injury is until you've, like, been part of one,
Right.
you just don't know, and, they asked for permission to they had to perform a surgery right away to relieve some of the pressure in the brain, um, and yeah, that was the last time I saw my husband
As he was.
as he was.
Yeah. So then the next several years are really a battle of him trying to even get back to somewhat of a normal life, right? Because
Yeah,
he probably should have died,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Based on the accident and
yeah,
everything, but
yeah.
yet God wasn't done.
No, he wasn't done.
And so that was probably a big a big struggle to go through,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, you go from being a married woman
Mhm.
and having a father to help discipline and care and
Mhm.
love your children
Yeah.
to then being a caregiver on
Yeah.
your own,
Yep.
and your kids have lost their father, and
Yeah.
you've essentially lost that husband relationship
Mhm.
that you know that was once there.
So, if you're watching this right now, you're probably like, "Well, this isn't fair. Like, this, no one should have to go through this." But yet, what would you say God showed you through all of this process of having to go through this? And if you could go back and say, "Well, I want to undo that. I want to erase that," would you? Like, what did you? What has God done in all of this?
um I would say that, well, first of all, I would never take it all back.
Hmm.
um
Even though it's
Even though it's a struggle daily, but it helps me keep my dependence on the Lord.
hmm,
I can't be self-sufficient or it doesn't work.
right,
Um, I mean, that's
yeah,
in everyday life,
yeah,
but especially, yeah, I tend to be kind of I wouldn't say prideful person, but definitely like get it done
I
myself
got
kind of
it.
person.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I can't do this on my own.
no,
This is something that without God's help, I just would fail every day.
right,
And I do fail some days, but just the intimate and special moments that I had with the Lord well, he was in a coma for 17 days.
hmm,
When he finally emerged from the coma, he had to learn how to talk. He couldn't speak.
right,
I mean, it had to like come back to him. He had a feeding tube. He couldn't walk. They had to use a machine to help
yeah,
help him walk.
yeah,
And and those are all just the physical things, right? Emotionally and mentally, it's been very hard.
Yeah.
But again, God redeems. He's faithful. And yeah, just I have to fully rely on him to get through this life because it's not easy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was 10 years ago. And
10.
Right. So you've, kind of gone through this, and then we meet.
Yeah.
And, you were going to another church, and nothing wrong with that. It was, sort of going on Sundays and doing that
fulfilling
whole
the
thing.
purpose for the time being.
Yeah. And then there's always a reason for God making a shift. And
Yeah.
so, talk about that and what that has meant to you and what you have sort of gained and learned now in the last 4 years of what God really has done in your own heart.
Yeah. So I think that there was a preparing season for the accident. Like God knew that was happening. And he so graciously gave me a church home that I was able to be poured into and discipled and mentored and just well taken care of.
Yeah.
That season unfortunately ended, and we moved away to another church, and it was serving its purpose. It was doing what it needed to do, but I just felt like I missed that
Intimacy.
home church intimacy, like knowing the people,
Yeah.
being close to the people, calling my pastor,
Yeah.
getting dinners brought over when Brian had his accident.
Yeah.
We did nothing.
Yeah.
We did nothing.
Yeah.
We were fully taken care of, and that was the intimate relational part that I had grown to love of our old church.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that you were doing something different, but I could feel the similarity in the family style of your church.
Yeah.
And so I was drawn to it. And at the time, my boys were teenagers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they were like,
I remember.
let's see, what would they be? 17 and 19
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And so teenage boys are sometimes a little challenging and difficult, but they were engaged.
Yeah.
They really
I remember the first time they came to my home experience. You guys came to my home experience, I think, first.
Yes.
And man, they weren't saying nothing. You know what I mean? Like
they'd
eat, but they weren't saying anything. And I'm like, what are these guys doing here? Like, do they want to be here or whatever? And
yeah, it just takes time,
Yeah, but man, 4 years later, like these men have owned, I call them men now, because they've owned their faith. It's not your faith anymore.
Right.
Right? It's not Brian's faith. It's their faith. And they're actually taking on ownership. They show up at the home experience. They RSVP. They, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They participate on their own.
Still don't bring food, but that's coming.
Yeah, we're going to get you guys. No, but they'll eat it. But, I get it. When I was that age, I would do the same.
Yeah.
But that's been really neat.
But
to
it's
see
to
your
watch
family.
them
Yeah.
grow in their faith and open up, and we can share freely now at home.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was kind of like, we went to church, but we didn't go beyond the walls,
Yeah.
And now I see them like having conversations with me,
Yeah.
doing things in public that normally they wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
Just
living out their faith.
they're living out their faith, and it's been a blessing really to watch. One of the things that happened when Brian had his accident was they really lost a male figure in their life.
Yeah.
Like they love their
dad. He has a major brain injury. It's hard.
He has a lot of deficits that keep him from doing, I think, what he really honestly desires to do.
Right.
So that was one of my prayers, was that God would bring, mentor, manly men, godly men that will show them what it's like. And he's like,
doing it.
Again, he's doing it again.
Yeah.
Redemption.
That's really what I want you to really understand, is through the most difficult, traumatic, painful, some self-inflicted and some not.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
God's not
he doesn't
concerned either way.
No, he fixes it no matter
This
what.
is why I'm trying to redeem this word repent, because the word means all you did that one night to receive forgiveness is you turned to him.
Yeah.
And you said, I just need you. Like, I need
So
to know
simple.
this, right? That's ultimately what he offers us, is to turn to him.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do in this church is I'm trying to open up this relationship where I'm like, hey, the 4S's, the home experience, all of this is based on relationship.
Right.
God isn't impressed with your fruit, your flowery words.
Right.
He wants you, and he wants you to spend time. I'll give you the last thing. If you were gonna share with somebody, maybe there's somebody out there that heard your story about Libby and being pregnant, or maybe and you would say, I would just want to share this one thing, whether it be about pregnancy, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
What would you say? That someone, maybe a woman or somebody, really needs to hear this from you.
I would say that no matter your choices, whether it be your choice, whether it be someone who made the choice for you, I believe that God is the giver of life, and had I acted on what I would have possibly considered a mistake,
Sure,
I would not have this beautiful story.
Yeah.
My amazing daughter, and now my son-in-law, and my granddaughter. And I think that, there are some misconceptions on women's rights, and I think that if I had anything to say, I would just say, just remember that God is sovereign and he's faithful, and I could have had that affair and nothing could have happened.
Right.
It could have been my secret to keep to myself. Correct. And, I don't know, God could have used that too. Plan. But God created a human life out of that situation, and I'm so grateful for that. And
he's not done.
And he's not done. It's going to continue for generations and generations and generations. But you have to be open and available. Yep.
So good. Yeah. Purity and availability. You said open and available. That's purity and availability. It means open your heart to him. Yeah. Let go and trust. He's not done. Your story is still being written, and one day your story could be right here telling it to someone else. I really want to encourage you, because more people need to sit in this chair and share what God has done in their life, because I think this is where a lot of people really receive and see, wow, God really is who he says he is. Thank you so much for your transparency, your friendship. Our families have really gotten to love one another. And I'm excited to see what he's going to do in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. If we're still here.
Yeah, we'll be here.
Yeah. So thank you all. And there'll be some questions now that you guys can kind of share. And I'll just say, man, be open with each other and get to know each other. Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. That's the call that he really invites us into. Yeah. God bless you.